I'm here with Jeremy Graham and Mika Kalathil, co-founders for a company called Learn Elixir, which is basically an educational platform for developers to learn very quickly a language that has a lot of potential. It's something that's innovative, it's relatively new, and there's a lot of opportunity in the space, especially within niche market with some notable organizations that use Learn Elixir. So Jeremy and Mika, as I said, co-founders of Learn Elixir, are joining me here today to talk a little bit more about Learn Elixir, a little bit about the challenges that are involved with running an organization like this, as well as the success story and maybe a little bit more in-depth knowledge about what Learn Elixir does. So let's start with Learn Elixir. I mean, let's start with the non-website version. Obviously, everybody can go to your website and take a look at how you explain what you do, but maybe you can give me the non-website version of what it is that Learn Elixir is all about.
So Learn Elixir started because I was in the industry for quite a while, and I discovered that there was a lot of gaps in knowledge when I was hiring people. So I would go to do a hiring interview, and the people that would be seniors wouldn't actually have the skills that I thought a junior should have. And that seemed like a big gap that needed to be filled in order for Elixir to gain popularity. And I myself liked using Elixir. Every developer that I converted just absolutely loved it, never wanted to go back to their original languages. But it was hard to find work because there's not enough Elixir developers, so people tend to stray away from using Elixir because of the fact that it's harder to find employees. Now it's not really the case anymore. A few years later, it's actually quite easy to find Elixir developers, and part of the reason is courses. So that's the main reason Learn Elixir was created, is to be able to bring that value to developers and be able to upscale their career really quickly and get them to that level where they can be hired in as senior level jobs.
Give me some examples of companies that might use Elixir.
Actually, most of our telephone networks are run on Erlang, which is basically Elixir, what Elixir goes down into. Actually, 90% of our phone traffic runs through Erlang nodes, and companies like Discord, Sony Ericsson, Adobe are all using Elixir to make their company and product faster.
Okay. Someone was looking at taking an Elixir course. What would be the appeal of using Elixir versus some of the other, some of the other languages out there that maybe have been around for longer? Because I know Elixir is relatively new. It's been around for less than 10 years. So I know there's some that have been around for longer. So what's the appeal of maybe going towards an Elixir versus some of the other languages that are more established, I guess, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, so I guess it's almost a misconception that Elixir doesn't have background because it's based off of Erlang. And so it all gets compiled down into the Erlang code eventually, which has been battle tested for 40 years in the telephone space. So it actually has quite a solid ground that it's being built upon. So that's kind of the biggest benefit, is you really have 40 years of people's experience dealing with really, really concurrent networks, which is basically lots and lots of requests, billions. And that's what we use for telephones. So if you can imagine, like in a telephone system, if you had a bunch of calls, you wouldn't want my call to you if that was to fail, you wouldn't want Jerry's call to disconnect, for example. And so that's something that Erlang has always been really powerful at, is being able to maintain those connections and have failure. And so Elixir is just building on top of that, which is why it's a really, really good idea to kind of start using that, especially in the web frame, as we're getting to the place where concurrency is almost more needed. Like, more and more people are using the web. We're doing more and more intense things on each website. And to power that, we need more intense systems. And so Elixir gives us that ability to write those really intense systems, but still use a language that's completely easy to use. Erlang code, it's actually a bit hard to read and write. That's kind of the feedback you get from talking to developers. Elixir was based off of Ruby, so it's actually quite easy to write and is a really good intro language.
Okay, so some of the companies I know that use it, there's obviously communications platforms like Discord and WhatsApp. Also some obviously well-known large organizations like Amazon also use it. So if you were to, let's say, work for those kinds of organizations, what would your job look? Let's say I'm assuming I'm a developer, and now I'm looking at getting into learning Elixir, and give me some idea of what a day in the life, I guess, would look like as a developer, with whether it's one of those organizations or just in general.
Each organization has a very different kind of goal for what they use Elixir.
Sure.
And Elixir is one of those things that can be used in so many different ways. So you can go the hardware route. You can use Elixir for hardware. And it excels there for things like FarmBot that was created entirely in Elixir. So you could be working with hardware on day-to-day, but then you write your code in Elixir and you make everything run. You could be using Elixir more intensely for your web servers. So if you're dealing with a specific website, like a gambling website or any sort of real-time website, Elixir really excels in those spaces because it's very easy to push the data out to the clients. And so your day-to-day really looks like you would basically be working in the Elixir ecosystem most of the time and kind of leveraging the Erlang tools. That's kind of what the majority of your development day job would look like, is basically being able to know what tool for the job and leverage that to make everything faster. And the community is very, very helpful. So I'm sure in your day-to-day, you probably end up being in the community all the time. And they're just like a wonderful community. It's one of the few developer communities that has like zero conflict, zero arguments. I've not seen that happen in Elixir. In JavaScript, it was like every day I was just watching. It was like grab my bucket of popcorn and start watching what's going on in Slack.
Yeah, I know it's funny. There's a lot of very opinionated people within the developer community. As even I'm not a developer myself, but just knowing what defines good code versus bad code, or clean code versus dirty code, and these kinds of things. There's a lot of strong opinions around what that might look like. So tell me, who's your customer? I mean, you obviously have a learning tool, right? And a learning program for learning Elixir. So what's your ideal customer? What do they look like?
So Jerry actually has outlined like all of the different customer types that we can help best. So I think he's actually the best person to answer this one.
Perfect.
Short version is the ideal customer is somebody who's already interested in Elixir, knows a little bit about it, but wants the best way or the fastest way to pick up the language and use it. There are a lot of resources out there, but what we're finding is that they all cover the basics over and over and over again. So you can learn syntax on Udemy 20 times over, but as far as we know, we're the only program that exists that covers the end-to-end spectrum of everything you need to know to become a talented Elixir developer. So the easiest ideal customer, I guess, would be somebody who's already interested and shows that interest and wants to learn it. Other examples would be companies or CTOs who are looking to switch over their code base from, let's say, Ruby, Python, or Node.js, and need some educational tools to make that transition or migrate over to Elixir. People who are usually generalists out of boot camp, they only know a couple different languages, let's say, Ruby, Python, or JavaScript again, and they're finding it difficult to get employment, or they're kind of lost in the crowd since there's so many people. I think something like 40,000 new developers join that market every year. So if they want to kind of stand out with something more unique, use the word niche, but it's kind of becoming a little bit more mainstream now that so many companies are picking up. So it's a great way to stand out and get employment that way, and get a more comfortable job as well, better work-life balance, since most Elixir developers work remotely, and higher income as well. So kind of branches out as you go deeper and deeper, but essentially any developer can pick up Elixir, right? Yeah.
So do you find that most of the appeal would be to the more junior developers? Now I know you've given us a broad spectrum of who this would be suited to. Do you find that to a junior, because I know that one thing for us, I mean, having spent a lot of time in our history in the recruitment world, if you're looking for junior devs, it's quite easy to find junior devs. There's a lot of them out there. There's a lot of them coming out of school. There's a lot of them with very similar skill sets, very similar levels of experience. And as you get into a more senior, more specialized skill set, then obviously the amount of available talent diminishes quite a bit. So do you find that this is something where I'm fully aware that this can encompass all levels of development skill, but is this something that would truly give a junior developer a bigger step up in order to differentiate themselves from junior developers?
I'd say both junior and senior, or even retirees who want to get back into a job market. Of course, it is easy for junior developers to make this the next step in their career. And then maybe they start off as a junior with Elixir and can grow in that community. But also, people with 20, 30 years experience in programming are still reaching out to us, wanting to find the best way to learn Elixir as a language. So, they're clearly in a senior position themselves, but just want better resources to learn it. And then we've even had people who are retired and just want to program as a hobby who have reached out to us and want to use our program for their education. So it has different advantages for each stage. So far, I guess we've have more junior people reach out, but we've also even had senior Elixir developers reach out who say that our program could complete some gaps in their knowledge. I always ask them to take a look at our course content and let me know where they would start pulling value. And it's usually around the halfway mark. And they're already, claiming to be senior Elixir developers on their resumes. So it's something for everybody, right?
Yeah, and I guess when you get to the senior level, if you're truly a senior, not just a senior because you've been doing it for a while, but a true senior that's got an advanced skill set, there's probably a passion for learning that's part of that, right? Like if you're a talented senior developer, I guess maybe would be a way to go about it. If you're then you probably, outside of your job, there's probably a lot of just personal projects and things that you work on in order to continue learning and those kinds of things. So that you've got a well-established passion when you get to that stage in your career.
Absolutely. I fully believe that mastery is a lifelong process. So.
Yeah. Graphically, a target market for you? Like, is there, I know developers are global. That's obvious. Tech sector is global, but do you find yourself, your customers or devs that sign up, are they geographically located in specific areas, like in Canada, Western Canada, North America, anything like that?
We've been kind of focusing our outreach on North America, Canada, and the US, but we've also had a lot of organic inbound traffic come in from Mexico, Brazil, all throughout Europe, India, Pakistan, Iran, Sri Lanka, Japan, China, Indonesia, Australia. So it seems to be a worldwide attraction, but we've just been focusing on North America for now.
Okay, cool. So what's a challenge you're facing these days? What's a big hurdle for you guys at the moment?
As far as business development goes, I wouldn't say there's any big hurdles. We're just on a slow incline, moving upwards, and just slowly taking each day and compounding our results, split testing different avenues, making more content, editing existing content. There's no real gigantic hurdles to cover. It's just a daily improvement.
Yeah. So how do you, or what's the process of, like you said, business development is one of those things that's maybe not a big hurdle, but it's something that you're working through on an ongoing basis, which, I mean, being in the business I'm in, I recognize that that's something that all companies have as a constant challenge is sales. So take me through a little bit of your sales process. How do you go through the process of attracting potential prospects, in this case, developers, through to turning them from a prospect into a customer?
Yeah, it's a fairly straightforward process so far. Either we reach out organically or manually via like LinkedIn or Facebook, for example, start up a quick conversation. We did that a lot in the beginning, just kind of test the market, see what people are looking for and what they wanted, what they were interested in learning more about. Then as time went on, we kind of defined the funnel a little bit more clearly. And so if people come in from any channel, any advertisement, whatever it is, the next flag post, I guess, would be the website. They can take a look, see one of the videos we have posted there, read the testimonials from some of our success stories for students who are doing well in the industry, check out our course content. And then the next stage would just be booking a phone call with me so we can do a one-on-one conversation to make sure that this is the right thing for them. And I want to confirm absolutely that Elixir is the next language that they want to master, and then B, find out what sort of goals or aspirations they have, and to see if we can help them reach that goal or not. And then if we do agree, we can move forward. If not, we both just go our separate ways, right?
I guess from a competitor standpoint, is there what would be the competition? Would it be learning in other languages? Like, let's say you're a developer and you want to learn Python or you want to learn something else. Would that be considered a competitor to use as learning platforms, or is it something completely different from that? Like, what is it? What would you consider your biggest competition out there?
I would say that the biggest competition is probably other companies teaching Elixir. I don't really consider like other languages really competition because Elixir has such unique selling features. And so it really makes your life work balance quite a bit easier. So a lot of developers find them drifting towards that. And if they like that promise of work-life balance, they're not really going to go to another language like Python. They're probably going to stick to something that gives them that work-life balance like Elixir, which means that naturally our competitors are more Elixir teaching companies.
Okay. And have you seen a big growth in that space, like in the Elixir learning world, since you guys, I know you've been doing this for a little bit. So have you noticed since you started that the competition has increased because other companies are seeing opportunity in this space?
I've definitely seen a few companies sprout out, but not too many. Not really.
We're also finding a lot of our students have taken a lot of these previous courses or taking a lot of these previous platforms and still want to move over to us because it seems there to be it's a massive reiteration of the basics. So yeah, going to Udemy or other sites or even just reading books, it seems to cover a lot of the fundamentals over and over again. So I think we really stand out by teaching some of the more intermediate and advanced techniques and principles.
Yeah. Well, and I think, with Udemy and places like that, a lot of times people are really often looking for a quicker fix, right? Like I know you have, the program is, I think, 10 weeks long. Is that correct?
Yeah, if a person can move through each level in roughly 4 to 10 hours per level, they can do it in about 10 weeks time.
Yeah. And so a lot of times in Udemy, you're looking for something quicker, right? Like you're looking for something that's not quite as robust, at least in my experiences, for maybe the types of learning that I've experienced. There has been a little bit of a shorter thing, which means that it's less in depth and you probably don't come out quite with it as an advanced an experience, I guess, at the end of it.
Yeah, we're also approaching it with a different business philosophy. We're aiming for a higher quality, less quantity, where they're aiming for a higher quantity, less quality.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So what's next? Is this? Do you have anything on the horizon? Is there something that we can look forward to in the coming months or years? Anything in development that we'd be excited about?
So I guess on my end, there's one exciting thing for students is automated feedback. So like a lot of the coursework right now gets a manual feedback review, and I review everything. But we're moving some of that into both automated and manual. So not only will it have my pair of eyes, but it will also have a machine non-pair of human eyes. So that will make everyone better.
Cool. And is that when students are going through the process, you're going to have monitoring technology, I guess, going through that process in order to get that regular feedback? Like, what does that look like? What does that automated feedback look like?
So students submit assignments every week. There's an assignment to complete, and we use that to allow them to get actual hard experience. You can theorize things all you want, but until you actually write some code, it's not really that real. So that phase is kind of the feedback loop that we allow students to take, and adding a bit of automation there helps everyone.
Yeah. So just a couple more questions. What's one of the coolest things or the coolest thing about working with you guys? You're obviously smaller. People probably could have a personal relationship with you, getting to know you a little bit better. I mean, that's one thing that off the top of my head, I think that has a cool factor part of it. You get to know the founders as you're going through this process. what is some of the cool things, or one of the cool factors of either working with you or being a student or a customer of yours?
I would say being able to just communicate directly with Mika himself via Slack or on one of our weekly Q&A calls. We're not just an educational platform in that we're just making you digest our content and making you watch our videos, do the comprehension quizzes, and complete the projects. You can actually bounce ideas with Mika and deep dive into things and build your own startup, or help migrate your company's code over, or even just learn how to do a mock interview properly. So just having direct access to somebody like him who's had so much experience in the industry is just a huge value for people, just being able to have that access.
And I would also say that that's kind of the biggest part. What I call those QA calls is kind of like a lifetime support call. So if you ever need like support throughout your lifetime career, a side project, whatever you want, you can kind of just pop into those QA calls and start asking questions.
Very nice. So early on, I want to take one step back, even before when you guys were building this, for example. Did you face any setbacks? I mean, you guys are founders. You guys are building this thing that hasn't been built 1,000 times before. So did you face any setbacks that you had to overcome?
Jerry, do you have any?
Well, we had a previous startup that we had no liftoff with. And then after that, we tried to be our own development company, and then tried to work on startups as more of a consulting business. So this is really the fourth and fifth evolution of our business dealings together, just by getting customer feedback and really narrowing in what people wanted from the market. We started off completely the wrong area, and just by asking enough questions enough times, we got to the right area, and now we've got something that works, and it's working for people, and is getting a lot of value out of that. So it's not just a matter of scaling it up, but I guess it took a couple of years to figure out what this was.
Yeah. There's a couple things that in my history that are very similar, right? One, I remember talking to someone a number of years ago. He's a successful entrepreneur, and if you define success as building your business, selling it for millions of dollars, he meets that metric of success. And one of the tips, I guess, or pieces of advice he gave me is that sometimes it takes entrepreneurs many years to find that thing, right? To find that thing that it is that is really going to click and really going to resonate and work, right? And it's rare when that thing is where you start, right? Extremely rare. Everybody looks to the Facebooks and those kinds of things, and they say, well, that's what the definition of success is. But it's, as far as its value, it's financial value. But it's one of those things where successful entrepreneurs always go through iterations. They always go through learning. They always face hurdles and challenges and setbacks. And if they learn from them, and they continue to reiterate or create new iterations of what they're doing, then that's where they have the biggest opportunity for success. And I know for our company, really, we were, basically a tech recruiting company for many, many years. And it was through conversations with tech CEOs specifically that we were hearing that their challenges actually had more to do with sales challenges than it did with recruitment challenges. But it took us time to actually hear it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like because you're in this mode as an entrepreneur where you're sitting there and you're so focused on what you do that you don't always hear these little subtle messages, because it's not like somebody's coming to you and saying, you should not be doing what you're doing. You should be doing this other thing over here. You have to hear those subtle messages. And sometimes you're so focused on your pitch and on what you're trying to get across that you don't have that ability to hear those subtle messages. And then I had somebody specifically actually say to me that, not that we should be doing it, but this is the problem, right? Mm-hmm. This is the problem that tech entrepreneurs are facing right now. And it's a sales problem. It's not that talent. Tech talent is hard to find. Senior developers are hard to find. I knew that because I was recruiting for them. But it was one of those things where he was like, that's actually not the biggest problem that tech companies are facing right now. Like sales is a bigger problem. So when I started and it actually clicked, and I was like, you know what? I've had so many meetings in the last number of months where they've all said the same thing. I just didn't hear it.
Yeah.
So it finally clicked, right? And then we made a shift, and that's been the best decision that we've made as an organization. Is finally hearing that message, finally getting it to a point of making a pivot, right? A significant pivot as an organization, but definitely the right one. So
yeah, there's certainly positives and negatives to having tunnel vision. What really helped us is we would just do 3 to 6 month sprints with our tunnel vision, then poke our heads out of the sand and analyze all the results, analyze all the feedback, and then make a slight adjustment after that, right? So yeah, you definitely need a little bit of both.
Yeah, and that's an advantage being in the developer world, right? And you're talking about sprints. That's something that you see in that world, right? You don't see it a lot outside of that world, right? So you do have that ability to have the tunnel vision, go through this hardcore achievement, and then stop and reflect, and then figure out what the next sprint is going to look like.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Do you have any tips? Last question here. Do you have any tips for people out there? It can be people in your prospect group. It can be for devs, or it can be tips to other entrepreneurs as well that might be helpful for somebody that's maybe going down the path of learning in the dev community, or maybe an entrepreneur starting something up.
Mika, you want to start with learning Elixir?
Yeah, so I guess tips for learning Elixir, I would say just make sure you know the source you're learning from. There's a lot of sources and a lot of noise, but sometimes not all the sources are as amazing as they may seem. Some of them don't actually have a lot of production experience, and so you end up in the wrong route. On the flip side, there's also really, really great learning resources out there, not just Learn Elixir. So if you can find those ones, especially take advantage of the community and their knowledge, it's a really good way to plant your roots.
Mika, follow-up question. This is my interview now, by the way. If this was somebody's first introduction to Elixir as a programming language, where would you suggest they go to get their feet wet for the first time as a developer?
Yeah, good question. So there's a couple different resources. I'd say the very basic resource you can start with is the Elixir Lang website itself. It gives a really good introduction and overview of how the language works. Following up on that, there's a couple other courses that you can take, or even books that you can read. So I'd recommend checking out the Pragmatic Programmer. That's a site that sells loads of Elixir books, and that gives you those are written by some really knowledgeable folk. I've worked with some of them frequently, and that can give you a really good intro to the language. And of course, you'll probably end up hitting a cap, and that's when I would recommend you turn to Learn Elixir.
Fantastic answer.
And how about Jeremy? How about something on the entrepreneurial side? Maybe some tips or advice as an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I would suggest if you think you have a great idea, if you think you have a great business in mind, just ask your customers, your potential customers, if this is something that would solve their problems, and really spend a lot more time in market research stages and less time in the building stages to save yourself, and really get full clarity of what the exact solution to this niche market would be before you start building it. And then as you are building it, of course, like I said, 3 to 6 month sprints, take a look, do some iterations, split test every idea, make no assumptions. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of questions and a lot of feedback collection without being too attached to the end result, because that could be the wrong place you want to go.
Thank you very much. Jeremy, Mika, I really appreciate you joining me today and taking some time. And, I wish Learn Elixir all of the luck and all the best possible amount of luck and success in the coming months and years.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Shawn.
Have a great rest of your day.